I think a lot of the things that were creating the angst in 2015, we kind of rolled into 2016 in a very similar fashion. Not to mention the fact, Becky, I think the world was away on vacation. So as we all got back and started reading newspapers and looking at the data, I think there's a little bit of a catch-up going on as well.
Probably not all that surprising. You know, like as you mentioned, it's just a week later. People are kind of catching up on things. But the bigger question becomes, do these huge concerns continue to hang over the market for the rest of this year? Do you look at China? Do you look at the Middle East? And continue to see that really affecting investors like this? I
think it will. You got to step back and realize the further you get into the business expansion, the more conflicting signals you get, and we are getting them. We wrote a piece recently, our 2016 Outlook. We talked about the twilight zone, and if you remember the beginning of that show, and Rod Serling in that very ominous voice would talk about moving into a land of shadows and substance. And we look at the shadows as really being all the risks that you've been covering so well today: China, the yuan, oil prices, high yield markets, et cetera. And then the substance being the fact there are still good things going on, or better things going on. We do think the U.S. economy grows this year at least 2.5%, maybe somewhat more. We think the global economy can tick up somewhat. We think the consumer is in good shape. That will drive consumption spending at a reasonable level. Housing looks good. And when you put all that together, we think you still get growth in earnings this year, about 5%. And that's not a bad thing.
5%, not terrible, but not great.
Not great.
Either. And I guess if you're going to continue on this, the whole idea of this being the twilight zone, is that a scary place for investors, or is this a place where you can really find some opportunities?
I think you can get scared on some days. I think other days you can, and what we got to realize, there's two sides to the ledger. As you suggested earlier, there'll be plenty of reasons to kind of wring your hands and get nervous about substantive issues. But we think the good fundamentals are there as well. And when you net it out, we do think it'll be a year of positive returns for the equity market, certainly in the U.S.
So you're basically saying buy on the dips every time you see something like what we saw yesterday?
Look, I think you have to be careful going in, but if you believe what we believe, that the economy is in decent shape and that the earnings are going to drive the day, and we do, because valuations are pretty full right here. We don't think you'll get much expansion of the PEs. So you got to keep looking at the fundamentals and looking at the sectors that you think will benefit. We like healthcare, we like financials, et cetera.
Byron was on with surprises for next year.
Yep.
2.5% to 3%. If he had said that, that would have been the biggest surprise for anyone. That's way out of mainstream.
2.5% to 3% for GDP.
Yeah, that's way out of the mainstream right now. They're looking, first quarter might be under 1%. The Atlanta Fed thinks. How do we get to 2.5% to 3%?
Well, we think the consumer is a big driver of that, Joe. So the consumer.
Rhodes just said the consumer still.
Yeah, I saw that. So we're a little more optimistic about the consumer. We think the consumer will spend at a rate between, call it 2 to 3%. Housing is early on. This is the first time in 75 years that housing has not led the recovery. And you have two things going on. You have what we think is a consumer that's in good shape. You've got real wages going up. You've got low unemployment. You suggested before, 5% ticking down.
Feel like it.
It doesn't feel like it, but the reality is a lot of jobs have been created. And we think real residential investment will probably grow about 10% this year.